Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something absolutely fascinating. We are going to take the exact device you're using to watch this right now, and we're going to visually unpack the microscopic magic happening right inside its brain. We're going on a journey from the most basic building block, a simple transistor, all the way up to the incredibly elegant architectural solutions inside modern microchips. So if you've ever wanted a direct step-by-step look at how a blank piece of silicon turns into literally the most complex manufactured object in human history, well, you're in exactly the right place. Let's dive in. Here is our game plan for today. First, we'll cover the fundamental microscopic switch. Second, building NMOS and PMOS. Third, the CMOS integration challenge. Fourth, the four-core fabrication techniques. And finally, the evolution of nanometer nodes. All right, section 1, the fundamental microscopic switch. To really understand the building blocks we're dealing with today, take a look at this glowing green wafer right here. This image immediately gives you a sense of that high-tech, ultra-controlled manufacturing space we're exploring. You see, this single, shiny disk is basically the canvas. Across its surface, billions of tiny components will eventually be etched, stacked, and wired together. But the real star of the show, the fundamental unit that gets multiplied across this entire green surface, is something called the MOS transistor. So what exactly is this switch? Well, MOS stands for metal oxide semiconductor. It relies on four main parts, and honestly, it's helpful to think of it kind of like a tiny bridge. You've got the source and the drain, those are your current entry and exit terminals. Connecting them is the channel, which is the actual path where electricity flows. But the absolute most important part is the gate. By applying a voltage to the gate, you control the switching. It essentially opens or closes that path in the channel right beneath its oxide layer. And you know what? That incredibly simple on and off action is the entire foundation of all modern digital logic. Moving right along to section 2, building NMOS and PMOS. So how do we actually build these things? Over time, the semiconductor industry essentially created two distinct flavors to handle different jobs. On the left here, we have NMOS. It starts with a p-type silicon substrate, but uses highly mobile electrons to carry current through n-type regions. Because electrons move so easily, this one is incredibly fast. Now, on the right, we have PMOS, which was actually the historical pioneer. It's pretty much the exact mirror image, using what are called holes as carriers instead of electrons. Since holes are a bit less mobile, PMOS is slightly slower. For a long time, the industry actually debated which one to focus on until they realized, well, they needed both. Which brings us to section 3, the CMOS integration challenge. Combining both of those types led to a massive engineering puzzle. I want to pose this question to you. How do we actually put opposite transistors on a single shared chip body? Think about the physical paradox we're dealing with here. NMOS absolutely needs a p-type substrate to work. PMOS absolutely needs an n-type substrate. But a silicon wafer, it's just one solid piece of crystal. It literally cannot be both at the exact same time. But check out this incredibly elegant solution. This is a CMOS inverter. See that p-type substrate at the bottom? The NMOS transistor on the left sits perfectly happily right inside it. But for the PMOS transistor on the right, engineers do something just brilliant. They selectively implant an N-well. It's basically a localized, artificially doped N-type tub floating right inside the main p-type substrate. Neatly isolated by field oxide, both switches now have the exact environments they need. Above them, you have an ultra-thin gate oxide and a polysilicon gate controlling the flow, while metal interconnects wire them together. This twin-well integration, it's the absolute secret to achieving both low power and high speed in today's electronics. All right, section 4, four-core fabrication techniques. Now, drawing a cross-section on a slide is one thing, right? But how do we physically make it? To go from a bare, shiny silicon wafer to billions of precise transistors, factories rely on a continuous, repeating cycle of just 4 core processes. We've got photolithography, etching, deposition, and doping. You do these 4 steps to build the very first layer, then you loop back and do them all over again for the next layer, and the next. Let's look at each one in action. Step 1 is photolithography. Notice the extreme precision of that UV light. It acts like a highly advanced microscopic stencil. The light passes through a mask that contains the exact circuit pattern for that specific layer, and it exposes a light-sensitive chemical called a photoresist. Wherever that light hits the wafer, it physically changes the chemical structure of the photoresist, basically laying down the blueprint for everything that comes next. Step 2 is etching. Look at the intensity of that glowing purple plasma. Etching's job is simple in theory but super delicate in practice. It strips away the unwanted material that isn't protected by the photoresist stencil we just made. While some factories can use wet chemical baths to wash material away, getting the ultra-fine directional control we need for modern chips requires the dry plasma etching you see right here. Step 3 is deposition. Once we've carved out our patterns, we need to add new functional layers back in. Inside the deposition chamber, shown here, thin films, stuff like polysilicon for the gates, oxide for insulation, or even metal, are physically deposited onto the stacked wafers. We are quite literally stacking the building blocks of the transistor layer by atomic layer. And finally, step 4, doping. This wraps up the cycle. We use high-energy ion implantation here. Honestly, think of it like firing a microscopic high-speed atomic cannon. It forces specific P or N-type impurities straight into the silicon crystal. This is exactly what tunes the electrical conductivity to create those source and drain regions, or that crucial N-well we saw earlier. So it's lithography, etching, deposition, doping, repeat. That sequence is the absolute heartbeat of all process engineering. Last but not least, Section 5, evolution of nanometer nodes. Let's zoom out from the factory floor for a second and look at the big picture on this timeline. Back in the 1960s, we started with aluminum metal gates, and these features were massive, measured in tens of micrometers. By the 70s and 80s, we shifted to polysilicon gates for much better control. The 90s and 2000s brought multi-level metal wiring and deep UV lithography. But just look at the 2010s to now. We're using 3D transistor structures, wild new insulating materials, and extreme ultraviolet light to build at nodes of 3 to 5 nanometers. To put that into perspective for you, 3 nanometers is roughly the width of just a few strands of DNA. Going from tens of micrometers down to that scale is just a staggering achievement of human engineering. Every single step we just explored today requires exacting nanometer-level precision. The strict tolerances and doping concentration, the thickness of that gate oxide layer, the microscopic alignment of the masks, all of it directly determines if the chip works and how fast it performs. It is an absolutely awe-inspiring process that puts billions of switches right in the palm of your hand. But before we go, I want to leave you with a provocative thought. If we've gone from tens of micrometers down to an astonishing 3 nanometers in just a few short decades, what happens when we literally run out of atoms to shrink? Are we standing at the edge of silicon's final frontier, or is the next fundamental switch already waiting to be discovered? Thanks for hanging out and learning with me today. Keep your curiosity focused, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.